So we're piloting today. I'm happy to have you here. I said we're not going to do intros, so I just want us to jump straight into it. And at any given time, if you want to give a shout out to Ikaslak or your family or whatever, that's on you.
Cool.
Like shout out to Mahiking and everyone, and you know.
I must cry actually. Yeah.
No, but the people that are helping us today, man, I want to give a shout out to them. A huge Mahiking community. So I want to say thanks to them. I don't know if you want to have your phone or if you want to use mine, because you send me a long list of things you want us to discuss.
Yes.
Very serious things.
Yes.
You ready? Because you talk a lot.
I'm fine.
Okay.
You can go ahead. I'm on standby.
Let's go on it. So I managed to watch an episode of Podcast and Chill with Mighty Jamie. So Mighty Jamie's become quite prominent online this year with the dissection, speaking specifically about the Matlanga Commission.
Yes.
And the ad hoc committee. And one of the things that was raised there is what General Lieutenant Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has achieved in terms of shining a spotlight on the police in South Africa, potentially reshaping our view of them. So just from your side, how do you view SAPS, South African Police Services? What do you think this whole thing that we've seen this year happening has done? Has it been positive, negative, etc.? Just whatever you're thinking. Please remember, this isn't an interview.
Yeah, so the security cluster, I think, as a whole has been compromised in South Africa for a couple of years. In the security cluster, I include SAPS, I include the NPA, I include the Army, SANDF.
Sure.
And IPID, in intelligence community, we've been compromised. And that's because the country's leaders have created a posture of behavior that's close to equivalent of associating the people who are supposed to help us protect people from crime and corruption are actually the leaders in driving crime and corruption. So some people call it mafia state, I don't know. But I think that the posture is very negative for the country.
Yeah.
Remember, we come a long way with the likes of the late Jackie Silebi. We've been the chairman or the leader of Interpol as a country through Jackie Silebi. South Africa is not a small country by volume, size, economy, but importantly, it's not a small size when it comes to reputation. We're a well-known brand, well-respected in many markets, highly respected in Africa, even though sometimes we think less of ourselves. So the image is messed up in a big way. If you really spoke about it in equity terms, and we said, well, let's say out of 100%, South Africa had an equity of 100 million as a reputation in terms of the police and so on, we would have dropped significantly by at least minimum of 60% in terms of the score.
60%?
60%, because we've been consistent in creating a mess of the image called the security cluster, and I include SAPS. I don't want to be unfair because even the judges have been bought. You know, if you reflect, the Sunday Times ran with a piece saying how to buy a judge.
Jeez.
Recently past weekend. So that tells you a story about how the extent of the damage to the image called, or the entity called South Africa.
Okay. You sound very PR and diplomatic, so I'm trying to figure out how we're going to navigate this.
So part of it is because I'm a reputation specialist, a specialist in country branding. So I'm likely to have a conversation. I can be robust, but I'm also quite measured in my level of robustness, because I recognize that someone with a Woolies bag might actually come after me. So and sue me or things like that. I saw somewhere that, you know, in the commissions or somewhere, they take notes and they ask you your name again. So I'm trying not to compromise my name in a point where when I drive in the streets, I have to be cautious. But let's have the honest conversation. I think ask the questions. I'll do my best to not to reputationalize it. I'll do my best to have a crucial conversation.
No, it's important that I make sure that you're comfortable, number one. But I also need to ensure that whatever questions I ask and whatever conversation we have doesn't put you in danger. I know we're joking about it now,
Yes.
the Woolies bag and our Ket Matlala taking notes, but people have died. So it is serious. And some people are raising that as much as girls on social media are now saying he's hot because he's got money. And the reality is people are getting killed in this country. Yeah. And that's why I'm just trying to figure out, like, do we have a frank discussion as a Ma'auti about what's going on in this country, or should we keep it professional, especially with the work that you do? Because
I think
part
a bit of
this,
both. The authenticity of these conversations there. I've watched the stuff that you do.
Yeah.
So kudos.
Thank you.
I think you've also held conversations with serious business people, but you made it lighthearted. But you've also had some very, very crucial conversations. And I think we strike the balance.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be scared to talk, because we do have something called freedom of speech in South Africa. It's highly protected and it's necessary. So this thing about sugarcoating the reality. And that's why I said, if I was to assess just top line of my head,
sure,
the image of the South African police, SAPS, bar the fact that there are good women, men and women in blue who do a great job every day, and there are those who do a bad job every single day. They ask for bribes every time you turn the corner in Sentin and you're coming out of a meeting, hustling, trying to find some cash, and they ask you for more cash. And sometimes I've got my last 80 bucks, and they take the last 80 bucks because they say cold drink.
Yeah.
And I don't know what do I have to do with this, with your cold drink, when I'm trying to run a very small business. I'm trying to survive every day. And I think the story I'm telling is the one of many South African entrepreneurs, young people who come out of a Sentin Convention Center from a conference for empowerment or growth, and all of a sudden you have these people following you, asking for money. So the ethical component, the conscious part is gone in the ecosystem, in the environment. So someone looks at you and brazenly asks you for money, even when you've done absolutely nothing and they don't deserve it, they haven't worked for it.
Sure. Let me go through the questions. Please try and keep the answers short.
Sure.
And I'll just try and go through them as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
If there's anything that comes up, then I'll raise it. In your opinion, what's the biggest reputational risk facing the police at the moment, considering that you've spoken about a 60% decline? So from 100 million, if we were to be brand South Africa at 100 million, you're saying we're basically at 40 million now. But what would be the biggest reputational risk to the police specifically?
Domestically is that the citizens don't trust you.
When a police officer shows up,
they just think this is a clown.
Or he came to us for cold drink.
Yes, and that's why in the Western Cape you could see, I think it was the Western Cape, there was a chap who was climbing, who was on top of a police vehicle, refusing to get off, and the cop was so polite and composed. But in a different country, it would have been a different matter altogether. So there's the trust deficit in the police, the faith that the police have the ability and the willingness to do their job. The fact that if somebody breaks into my house, I'm likely to call my security company or my brother than to call the
police. And they might tell you that there's no car.
Besides, there's no car. In fact, there was a recent incident. There was I live in a small state, and there was an incident. I saw somebody's car parked in a specific environment for too long, and I called the SAPS, and it took them probably about an hour to show up because I had driven in and out of our gate for a while, and I noticed, but this car is parked strangely, and it occurred that it was stolen. And they came and took it, but after many hours after that.
That's shocking.
So that's South Africa.
Do you think Mkhwanazi and his bombshell has helped in any way the reputation of police to say, look, there are still some good ones. It's not that they're all bad.
Good and bad. The good thing is that we now know, and we're dealing with this in the South African context, because we've always been a transparent nation. So we put things out there, we discuss, you remember TRC. So we come from a history of transparency. However,
and commissions.
Yes.
Sure.
Sometimes they waste time, but we come from that history.
And money.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the bad about it is that our intelligence and the lack thereof is exposed. And a lot of the really serious conversations about the police's inability to do work is exposed. And to an extent that if I'm a foreign agent and I'm watching this and I was my job was to target South Africa, the job has become that much easier because we now know the weaknesses of the system. But overall, he did a great job. We need men and women who can do exactly what he did in other sectors, especially when you reflect on the level of corruption happening in the private sector, and that no one is willing to actually look at themselves in the mirror and talk about.
Yeah. So we speak about the police. You've mentioned intelligence. As you mentioned now, there is a story that has been coming out about a specific judge. How corrupt do you think our judiciary is? Because that was one of his allegations as well, that the judiciary has also been captured. And some people are now arguing that judges can be bought. So we speak police risk. What about the judiciary, the people that are actually meant to enforce the law? We're not even speaking lawyers. Now we're speaking a judge that has to make a decision about you spending time in jail or you not going to jail or a certain case disappearing. We'd assume that corruption happens with just the police, but now judges might be involved.
I have to be quick on it, but I'll try. So there's few reference points just on top of my head.
Sure.
If you remember the judge who drove on into a building properly drunk.
Yes, I remember that judge. I can try to get his name, but please carry on.
And then there's another judge that we're talking about in recent times. On the Senzo Miwa case, there was a judge that was removed, I think Momela, by President Cyril Ramaphosa, because his conduct was just unprofessional. But also it seemed like he's compromised. And then the current judge on the Senzo trial also had issues where he got too emotional. He would be patronizing to counsel, senior counsel who represent the various individuals who are suspected, as if they are automatically already found guilty. And he had to issue an apology at some point for his conduct.
That's unprofessional.
So that tells you a story about where we are. But let's take it further and push it to the NPA. But when promised us action, but now as she retires or contract coming to an end, and you ask yourself, what was the success rate? Very, very poor performance. So we are in trouble in the judiciary, we're deeply in trouble in the NPA, and we are really paralyzed in the SAPS. And that's a big problem for the country. If I were a CEO of South Africa, either exiting because my term is coming to an end, President Cyril Ramaphosa, or somebody who's planning to come in, I would have a deep reflection about how we are going to reposition safety and security in South Africa. That's the biggest job I would prioritize. It's a mess. You can't walk through Hillbrow. You can't walk comfortably and speak on the phone in Braamfontein. You can't drive with your window open in Johannesburg because in seconds you would have to go find a new device because they'll be running very, very, very fast. That's if they don't shoot you.
So the judge is Judge Mutala.
Yes.
I hate the commissions. I hate the money that gets wasted. I hate the proceedings, and I hate the fact that they are not legally binding. A report gets drafted at the end, which is then handed to the president, who then gets to decide if any actions are taken. With that said, put aside, do you think we need to do some type of investigation or inquiry into the legal system as a whole? Because there might be people sitting in jail incorrectly, so there might be people that are walking the streets free. Because maybe we just have not investigated, and I'm not even sure who would do it. Maybe external parties to South Africa, to actually investigate if our judges are impartial, objective, sound, or if there's proof that they actually take money to meddle with cases.
The former Chief Justice of South Africa, Mogoeng, has had some shortfalls. At some point, he gets very spiritual. He's going to be a politician, and then God is going to make it happen, or a spiritual leader would make it happen. It will definitely happen, and that's okay. He had some shortfalls. But this man actually came out and said the judiciary is captured. He has the key to knowledge about the system. So I spoke about his shortfalls before somebody says, but you're not thinking. But he had access to a lot more insights than me. And he said, the biggest risk we're facing as a country is a captured judiciary. There are many people who are in jail wrongfully. not suspicious, we can go check. But there are many people who are wrongfully accused and they end up being sentenced. The Senzo Meyiwa trial itself brings a lot of questions about what really truly happened. And judges are involved in this whole thing. Leaders in the judiciary are involved. And that's why we have this specific case, recent case that we're dealing with right now, to a point where I think the judge has been asked to recuse themselves so that the investigations can proceed. And I think at some point, hopefully there'll be criminal charges where criminal charges are warranted. But we do have a problem that you go to and imagine, forget crime, go to cases at the labor court, where you can see that judges will spend 8 days debating with counsel, debating the legal process and prescripts, while a career of an individual or individuals is being compromised. Because the big companies, when they go to the labor court, you almost know that unless you are patient and you are willing to fight, you almost know that you are going to lose. And that's why many people choose to settle. So the justice system, the judges are not really, and we don't know how we're going to, who judges the judges, because there is a former Chief Justice, I think Zondo, who said, he has been quoted in the media, and I can go look it up. But I can say this, he had been quoted as saying, well, you can't, prosecute me, I'm a judge. That type of thing. Yes, I would have to look for that comment. I don't know whether it was can be verified. I can look at it.
Nothing wrong. It can be looked up.
But there was that kind of a story to that effect. So it's a very sensitive environment, and they get very angry when. So there was a funny ruling recently made that too many cases, ruling or judgment or something, but something is on paper, saying that too many cases, civil cases. It's just Penwell and Tshepo threatening each other, and so they waste time of the courts. And as a result, they push for more arbitration before you even attempt to go to court. We have to test those type of things and whether it's actually justice, because arbitration, when you are not powerful, you are going to end up taking what the powerful person says. Like, I'm going to give you a settlement, and you're poor. What are you going to do? Are you going to fight further, or you're going to take the settlement?
You'll take the settlement because you don't have money for lawyers.
Precisely. And that's the sad part about the judiciary. They have such an important role to play. I think they are very brilliant judges, especially when you look at Madlanga Commission. Madlanga himself, gives a sense of hope, a sense of legal finesse of South Africa. We've managed to be represented well in the ICJ case at the World Court of, International Court of Justice, South Africa versus Israel on the Gaza matter. However, all that work and reputation gets damaged when one judge makes such barbaric or strange, really strange decisions.
It would be ex-Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in the last month of November, who would also warn about a capturing of the judiciary. And to what you're saying about Mogoeng, I think it's meant to immediately raise alarm bells. And for him to say something like that, for ex-Chief Justice Raymond Zondo to also allude to that, the fact that nothing happens after they raise that, it's like a president warning us of something.
Yes.
Clearly you've seen or known something, please come and tell us, or please tell someone. We can't just, Mogoeng said, that guy likes God, and then we move. Ex-Chief Justice Raymond Zondo said, be careful of capture. What do you mean? Why is no one asking? This is my concern, and I'm not sure how far you're going to go in trying to be diplomatic around this one. At the time of the Zondo Commission, I think Raymond Zondo was the acting Chief Justice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
At the conclusion of it, it looked like he was being gifted with the Chief Justice role by President Cyril Ramaphosa. That potential conflict of interest where certain allegations get raised, or people like Brian Molefe and others are like, look, call in Cyril Ramaphosa and Raymond Zondo says, no, this is not within the scope.
Yes.
Should we just take that to be like, well, look, a judge said this, the scope said this, it's just coincidental that he became Chief Justice? Or should we read what we're seeing surface level and they should be tested to say, we need to know that there was no conflict of interest? And why does a president appoint a Chief Justice where the Chief Justice now probably has his hands tied and can't go after the same president?
Yeah.
I think there were similar arguments with Mkhweng and Zuma.
Yeah, so the gifting thing is a possibility. It seemed like a reward. But the nice thing about judges is that once you've rewarded them and they've retired, they start talking, because they still have to maintain their judicial integrity, their reputation. They never want to go in the history books as having endorsed strange things. The reality of our country is that you call a commission to buy time. And so this commission buys you, a lot of people, a lot of time. And then you take another 6 months to make a decision about the findings.
Sure.
A year has gone, or maybe 2 years, maybe more. We've lost money as a country. There's a big problem. There's an arm of government that is supposed to exercise oversight called Parliament. And here that's a lost opportunity, because Parliament needs to put a lot more pressure at an alarming rate. And since the formation of the GNU, I watch Parliament. I think they're doing a great job, especially on the commission that's dealing, the parliamentary committee, ad hoc committee that's dealing with this matter that we're discussing now. But Parliament should be doing a lot more. And one would want to suggest that the weakening of organizations like the EFF, stripping, where you lost people like Ndlozi, Shivambu, Malema, that combination gave Parliament some firm positioning. They used to tell stories and expose stories and do so with a bit of pressure. But with the GNU, all of a sudden, we know about Steenhuisen and how he's using his credit cards. So he doesn't do the opposition work effectively.
Yeah.
Because he's part of the system. The MK party is really, really a mess right now, positioning-wise. They are involved in too many things. So we don't have strength there. Then there's an arm of society that's completely quiet. Two arms of society. Maybe I shouldn't say completely quiet, but I think they're very quiet and they could do a lot more. The business fraternity in South Africa could help us to solve the many problems by organizing themselves and speaking on bad behavior. I won't call it malfeasance, horrible behavior, disastrous behavior. And then that's the business fraternity. You need the CEOs to start talking because their voice can put pressure on politicians because they are investors in our country. But we also need academia to speak a lot more.
That's the other arm.
Yes. South African academia is too quiet. For, you expect when you open a page through a platform like the Business Day or the Sunday Times, let me be fair, the independent media's Saturday Star and Sunday Independent and the Daily Mavericks, that you find a lot more voices from academics who ask testing and probing questions, but they take the middle line and they're too soft in my view. And I think that's the sad part about our country. I'm not saying many academics don't speak, but I think there's a gap. In fact, I do a lot of media interviews, country branding, and there'll be a professor so-and-so on a panel with me. And sometimes I wonder, what kind of a professor is this? What's happening in this room? Because you can hear that they're either ill-informed about the subject, they don't have a reference point, they're just joined the panel to waffle. And we let them get away with it because they've got these academic credentials that so many of us wish we could have.
Sure.
So I think business needs to start looking at themselves in the mirror and say, if the president has done something that we are very concerned about, that the business must start talking and not worry about the next tender. And the problem is that most people think through their pockets, and business, I think, is guilty of that. From time to time, they'll talk. They'll say South Africa is in trouble. Capitec CEO used to speak a lot. You know, the banking sector especially, they come out and say, I mean, I must admire Sim Standard Bank. Who come out and say stuff. But I think they, as an organized system, they don't say a lot. Black Business Council, you expect them to come out stronger. They speak, and I think Matabane speaks. But I think as they need to come through as an organized system so that we can deal with these things. That because if the NPA is compromised, if the police are compromised, if the judges are compromised, we need somebody else to do it. Otherwise, we create space for problems, and it's called civil society. And in South Africa, you know, we remember what happened in July 2021. When people are frustrated and you don't speak to them accurately, timely, and in a respectful way, they start with a tire. And the next tire, and the next minute you have billions of damage and loss of life, loss of investment. It's a serious risk for our image and our reputation locally and globally. And I say locally because domestic sentiment is more important than anything else. We often say investor this, investor that. That's important. But those guys are not going away because they know there's a going concern. South Africa is a market. So they'll stay. They are staying. They are reinvesting. Americans are reinvesting in this country. But we forget the domestic sentiment. The people who live in Amaskral, Guguletu, Alex, Soshanguve, Mamelodi, Amaskral, I say again because I'm from there, and Mahike.
Yeah. You alluded to this earlier, and maybe this is me slightly responding to why business is quiet. Firstly, yes, money is their focus, not so much politics and noise. But number two, they have their own scandals. You know, when you speak banking, you're speaking the same big banks that haven't had their own commission of inquiry regarding the rigging of currencies.
Yep.
Almost no one has been punished in that regard. They are somewhat responsible for the high inequalities we have. This is not just banking now. This is just the private sector as a whole. And they have their own corruption, of which they probably collude with government in some way because they get some of the work. They fund some of the politicians as well. So I think that's probably part of the reason why some of them keep quiet. And the ones that talk probably talk because maybe they're not getting money or they're frustrated by some process that's frustrating their business. We speak business, and one of the businesses that I wish more South Africans could be involved in is the business of supplying government, whether in goods or services.
Yeah.
It has gotten a very bad reputation over the years. As soon as you tell someone you're a tenderpreneur, that means you're fat, you're black, you're corrupt, you know nothing. Yeah. Speaking about business, what is the role of tenderpreneurs, or what is your view on tenderpreneurs and how they are viewed in this whole mess? We see it from the State Capture Commission. We see it now in the Madlanga Commission where there's this golden thread. So there's government, there's of course maybe the judiciary, but then there also seem to be these characters that we know as suppliers to government. You've got your Tembisa, not necessarily suppliers per se to government, but the Guptas were involved in supplying Eskom, which is an SOE, and they did business assisted by various government departments. What do we have to say about that? Or what do you have to say about that in terms of this whole value chain that we're looking at?
Yeah, we have a big problem. So we send people to the universities to study and complete so that they can go look for jobs. And that's why where I'm going is where you have a gap of role players who can actually do real business, authentic business as SMEs to supply products and service to the business fraternity, to corporates, but also to government. When you don't have quality in numbers and quality that is organized, meaning that they can lobby and say, but all these tenders, why are they going to the same people or people who are unregistered? Because we don't do any of that, we've created a culture where individuals who have some political connection and some don't even have, they emerge out of branch meetings and they say, I've got a CSD number, that supplier database, central supplier database number. These CSD numbers are circulated in political meetings. In fact, I've been invited before to somebody said, send me a CSD number and I'm going to send it because we're doing some work in the city of X.
Yeah.
And I was curious, so I sent this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing came out of it, but you can see that decisions are made at political level than quality. So the gap must be addressed of producing entrepreneurs and harnessing entrepreneurship from an education perspective, but also harnessing entrepreneurship from a community point of view, from a family point of view, so that you don't have this, create a gap for this. So for example, I'll say this and somebody's going to murder me after this, but I say it. So I'm an entrepreneur. I get invited to speak at an event and I honor the invitation. It's a public sector gig. I'm going to, and when I get in the room, there's like very senior people, chief director, that level of conversation. I thought I'm going to address 10 people and I'm going to speak for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It became a workshop of sorts. But then I'm not a registered service provider. So I'm invited and somebody is already registered. So I'm invited and you're going to, so-and-so will sort you out. You need to send us an invoice and an existing supplier would sort you out. So I'm subcontracting in a way, but it's fast tracked.
Yeah.
And the chap who has to pay me at the end of the session rocks up, I think I took a picture with him and I kept it just because I was fascinated at his dress code.
Sure.
I think he runs a catering company. Here you have a reputation, one of the foremost reputation architects in South Africa. You invite them to talk to the top echelons, but you are running out of time, and now you have to use this chap to subcontract reputation first. And so reputation first has to make a decision about, do I want to be associated with this person? They look cloudy. And those are the things that happen, that because we don't create open spaces for entrepreneurs to enter the market, we make the process so difficult.
Yeah.
It becomes nearly impossible for the genuine ones with brilliant ideas, the young people, because we set the credentials at 10 years and then we want to see the office facility, we want to see equipment. Where are these young people going to find equipment?
No way.
You and I know these things are expensive. So we have a problem. And part of the problem is corruption. The tenderpreneurs are the worst for me because they go and do projects, but they don't deliver anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know someone will say, but that's not even a real concept. But let's call them tenderpreneurs for now. We mean those with access to billions of accounts, who have opportunities to contribute meaningfully in our country and in our economy. They actually enable this problem because they talk to the other guy on the other side and they cut deals. We only know about things when deals go wrong, when one person doesn't honor. But the worst part is that the Eastern Cape situation, I think it was the Eastern Cape, where a 6-kilometer road or so was built for something like between 80 and 90 million South African rands. This is entrepreneurship in action. When you go and look, you'll find those ambulances that looked like funny things. I think it was there was a case, former spokesperson of the ANC, and then these funny cars that are supposed to.
That was when William Keys was still.
But the person, Ntate Pulemabe, defended himself. I don't know where the court case ended, but he defended himself and he told us his own version. But apparently these things were sitting somewhere in a storage for a long time. And there are many, many incidents where services are procured. Money has been exchanged. The state has been looted and these things are sitting under the garage somewhere. No one is using them. And that's the problem. So the entrepreneurs, through the Woolies bags and so on, they are enabling this thing. But the person on the other side who makes decisions is also an enabler. So there are good people who put out briefs. Some of us respond to those briefs, and many entrepreneurs, credible businesses, they respond and they get the work. But shucks, it's difficult. If you are, I can tell you now, if you had 6 months experience as an entrepreneur, 6 months, and you have 2 reference letters from Tshepo, and a brief for a very small job comes up, sometimes unless you're politically connected, you are, or somehow connected and networked in the system, you're really wasting your time in making a submission. And sometimes I say to my team, let's scan this thing, and we scan a document, and I say it's not even worth it. And that's because I've been through a process perhaps where we submit and they withdraw because the competent people are winning this thing, and then you resubmit. So it's a very bad game that's discouraging, and it doesn't stimulate entrepreneurship. And that's the sad part.
You speak about academia and arguably some of its uselessness, arguably. Would you say part of the problem is the fact that kids are going to school to read cases, to study textbooks, to write exams, but there isn't a practical element? So, for example, you study accounting, law, engineering, medicine, but nowhere in these courses, in these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years you're at varsity, are they teaching you how to submit a tender document, how to get on the CSD, how to maybe start your own practice if you can't get a job, how to price, where to go, how to maybe get into government. I mean, you're studying medicine, that's fine, you want to be a doctor. Yeah. But while you're here, we want to teach you how to get into government so that you can ensure that healthcare legislation is enacted that makes sense. And also the budget goes down to the clinics and the hospitals and to the doctors. But there's none of that, which then brings maybe certain profs or academics or PhDs to sit on panels with no practical experience because they've just been reading journals. But they don't know because the content of what they're studying is not matching. And that creates then that gap where I studied accounting, Umchita studied the street hustle.
Yes.
And when it's time to tender for financial services to a municipality, he gets the work, I don't. And then I complain. And someone asks, but do you have a company? Have you tendered? What is that? I don't know. I'm an accountant, but I don't know. This guy knows. Where did he learn it? On the street. Why were we not taught this, which is so important in our classrooms?
So, there's despondency where people simply don't submit because they don't think they're going to get this thing. So we should separate that from reality. But when I was at the University of South Africa... By
that you mean there are people that maybe can do the work, but they just feel like it won't get anywhere anyways.
You don't trust the system.
Okay.
But let's go to... When I was at the University of South Africa studying as a student, we realized the gap. Communication science, we realized the gap that this is too theoretical, and communication science, broadcasting is very practical. Media relations is a very practical skill. So we formed, and somebody did before me, but it was shaky when I got there, something called the Communication Students Association. And there, the intent was very simple, to bridge the gap between theory and practice. So we used to take students, our colleagues, I was the chairman of this thing at some point, but we used to take students to the SABC, when we did YFM, we did multi-choice, for them to touch and feel. We actually produced some work at the time, the public service announcements, to give people practical and tangible skills. That's what the sort of thing that you need. So there's no, but if I stretch it a little bit to the current topic, most people in the boardrooms cannot interpret financial statements. They sit there, the minute you get to numbers,
I can agree.
They just look around and you can see this is a person has no idea about ratios. So we need to augment academic qualifications with some bridging business functional programs.
Yes.
Such as entrepreneurship. Some institutions in South Africa will tell you they're already doing it. But, I can talk about my son. He goes to this specific institution and they're doing amazing work.
Sure.
They were at, the other day, they were GCIS presenting this concept that came top 3. He studies at university. Maybe let me protect him and not mention the institution, but it's a reputable South African public institution.
Yeah.
So you can see that they give them practice. He does stuff. And I asked him, you're doing these amazing things. What do you want to do? And he says, initially I thought I want to do law, but now I'm thinking about other things, maybe even sales management.
Sure.
Because I think there's this opportunity there and I can speak well. So I think you are right in saying we need to the academic institutions need to start working together with the private sector to package tangible programs. And they don't have to, they can be online, but tangible programs that just helps an entrepreneur how to start a business in one day in South Africa.
Sure.
And how to make it viable in the first 6 months. How to do your financials, how to submit a bid to a private sector, how to submit a bid to the public sector, which bids when you are inexperienced should you work on, what is the power of collaboration? Because when you are small and you don't have experience, it might be better to go to somebody who's established and say, can I join you? I have a concept, but
Yes.
can I join you and we go and bid because you have the experience?
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. So there's work that we wouldn't ordinarily have won, and we partner with our colleagues at Ebony and Ivory Integrated Advertising Agency, Nombini Matromakulu, Paul Middleton. And Reputations First, about 8 years ago, was younger, but it had ideas. And so we collaborate, and they create the space for this collaboration because they've got the creds, I've got the ideas and the energy. We go and bid together, and we get some of the work. And in the process, we discuss the terms. And we've been working together, and I think now for 8 years, for real. We were introduced by a mutual friend, but I'm also a hardcore networker, like really hardcore. So I go into rooms, I make it in Parliament, at the National Assembly, not because I've got some connection, because I find a way in. I make an effort. And I think that's what I would think about. But back to our discussion. The academic
that stuff should have been taught in schools.
Yes.
The thing that you've learned to master.
Yes. So the academic institutions, the colleges, the universities of technologies, they need to this thing about entrepreneurship should be compulsory. If you are studying medicine, we need to teach you how to run an ecosystem of a surgical sort of a GP setup,
Sure.
If you are studying to become an academic, we have to teach you how to set up an online platform. Get Smarter was started here in South Africa, I believe. And I think it's now acquired internationally. But it was started here at home.
Sure.
And that's because people were given the opportunities and the space to create. And now it's a viable educational platform. So entrepreneurship should be part of life every day. And maybe we should start talking to our kids about entrepreneurship as opposed to pushing them to go and learn how to submit Z83 forms and CVs all over, and hoping and praying that something from above is going to come, and often it doesn't happen. And that's why you have so many qualified graduates with lots of amazing potential who are sitting at home doing absolutely nothing.
It's tragic.
But the worst, the most tragic, if you talk about tragedy, are those ones that Statistics South Africa talks about. Not in education, not in training, not in employment. It means they just wake up.
Yeah. They're not even searching for work.
And ask you, what do I eat at breakfast, what's for lunch, and what's for dinner every day.
90-degree shift. We're at the G20 recently here, and I don't know if you've got maybe 3 points that stand out for you in the G20 that we hosted in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm spinning, but I attended G20.
Sure.
I went through the process of accreditation, and I think it really positions. I attended my capacity as a media analyst, but also as a freelance journalist. And that's how I get in the room.
Sure.
And a lot of people didn't make it in that room, but I was there. There were a lot of international journalists in that room. We gave them an experience called South Africa. We showcased, I think South Africa showed that it can host sophisticated events. I was proud to see colleagues from Brand South Africa, Government Communication, Department of International Relations and Cooperation, how they pulled this thing together to tell a story that we are able to hold global events. But beyond that, the media, international media, managed to help us to have an honest conversation about Malume, and I call it Malume out of respect, Malume Donald Trump, and his views about genocide in South Africa, Afrikaners being in danger, and white Afrikaners being in danger, and so on. They managed to tell a factual story about South Africa hosting this product and value proposition. And I think that was a powerful platform. I think Ramaphosa, or President Cyril Ramaphosa, handled himself very well amid serious attacks by Americans. We're not coming, we are coming, we won't come to collect a handover. Now, please, we will send a junior. And South Africa decided, no ways. There's no junior ambassador who's coming to G20 to collect this thing. This is a senior thing.
Yeah.
So it's been a brilliant positioning. It gets dented, unfortunately, by the fact that just after a couple of weeks later, the acting Minister of Police decides he's going to release crime statistics. To help us with what? I struggle with that proposition, because he stands there and says, rape every hour, and then the next minute there's 7,000 murders a quarter, maybe reduced by a small margin.
Sure.
None of that helps the positioning of the country. It doesn't, we show transparency, but we have to have timing. And there's a cabinet, Lekgotla. They need to have these conversations, because that thing is used as a platform to promote the incumbent, for them to just stand in front of cameras and they just do it for the sake of it. There's no need for you to update us on crime stats right now. We can deal with that in January 2026. Right now, we need to enjoy the moment that we just came out of a very successful geopolitical, economic opportunity. We should be leveraging that opportunity and telling a story about South Africa. So I think the brand equity of South Africa from a G20 point of view went up very high. I looked up on Meta, Facebook. There's a post by G20 USA, which says South Africa did a brilliant job. And on the same page, they've got Trump, of course, coming in like as if he's really politically campaigning. He's wearing a hat, so you can see that he doesn't really care about this thing. But really, I say this understanding that I might not get a visa to the US, and that's okay. I'll go to other places. I'll go online, and when his presidency ends, I'll reapply to visit the US. But for now, I'm very comfortable to say that his decision to create a very negative narrative about South Africa didn't work. There were many journalists there. Somebody gave me an estimate that there were at least 1,000 journalists in South Africa. Some of them didn't make it in the room, who were international, local and international, who were telling a story. South African journalists also did a great job. If you look at seniors such as Makhudus Farah, and the extent to which they were really repositioning the story. The South African National Editors Forum successfully ran the M20, and they handed over resolutions to President Cyril Ramaphosa and to the G20. It's incredible. I think it was a brilliant platform, and that's why I say we must protect this brand called South Africa. We must protect this country from unnecessary, unscrupulous people, corrupt people, and worse, academic institutions owe you and I an answer before we even go close this conversation about how these people who are testifying with master's and doctoral degrees, this one has the Ikuruleni comrade has a PhD or D.Lit from the University of South Africa, and she also has a master's in some kind of nursing from the University of Johannesburg. But the articulation of thoughts and process on the Madlamuka Commission says something else, that there's a mismatch between the reality and what we wish to have. The same happens with there's a gentleman who's testifying. It's sad. It's like there's a huge gap between the reality and what we are being promised. And a brand, we say, is a promise fulfilled, meaning that what you tell us on paper must actually come out when we listen to you and your leadership style. And some of these leaders really are questionable characters. I can't match the academia, the experience, the seniority of the roles they held, and the reality of what they're feeding us. It's really, really devastating for our soul and the soul of South Africa. But it's not too late. We can do something about it. And it starts by us helping the youth to get into entrepreneurship at a very alarming rate.
You don't think you've been hypocritical of the police releasing the crime stats, considering when we started this conversation, you spoke about our brand losing 60% value from a reputation perspective.
Yes.
And you spoke about how the police are not trusted. You spoke about how the police come hours later. You'd rather trust private security, and how it's dangerous to walk through Hillbrow
Yes.
as an example. You got to enjoy the G20, which the ordinary South African didn't. So you got to see the celebration.
Yes.
And I'd argue the facade, because it looked amazing from inside.
Yes.
But for the ordinary South African, nothing has changed. So you come out of that party that none of us attended, and you're now upset that the police minister is now bringing real hard data. And you're like, ish, but the timing, and is that not a form of hypocrisy to say, but that's the truth? And you guys in the G20 were in a mini bubble meant for overseas visitors, but we actually have serious problems now. And that 60% drop that you speak of, the G20 does nothing because the reputation is still bad. Abu Trump are still lying, and people are still dealing with crime.
So the reputation, 60%, I wanted to specify that I'm dealing with the security cluster.
Okay.
And then I'm happy to be hypocritical like that because I care about our country. That you can't in the middle, your timing must be everything. I've had an issue with this, how we approach stats, crime stats.
Sure.
Because we say to the world, we have 7,000 murders a quarter, but we have no strategy on how we're going to resolve it. And we show no signs of consistent improvement in dealing with the crimes. So all we're doing, and many countries do this sort of thing, but they find a way to tell the narrative in a constructed fashion. Now I'm speaking as a reputation advisor for the country. So if I was to advise President Cyril Ramaphosa, I was going to say the quarterly police stats, they need to be scrutinized, and you must tell the country. But we don't have to really make it as if it's a brand promotion opportunity, because politicians like talking, and then they talk about, there's this crime and we reduce GVV by 2% or 0.1. But we don't say what are the interventions that we are doing and what's the timeline to reduce crime. And when will I be free to walk through the city of Johannesburg at night, much as in other countries where you can freely walk on a park. I don't think you can walk on a park in Hatfield like we used to 15 years ago in Pretoria. I don't think you can walk. Definitely, you can walk nicely in Sandton perhaps for a couple of kilometers. But I think at some point that you are at serious risk. And that's the reality of our country. Yeah. So a bit of hypocrisy in saying, let's us as an ecosystem talk to each other, so that when you release the stats, they make sense. But you also tell us, what are you going to do about it? And tell it to South Africans. Don't tell it to your cluster, because your cluster you need to address in their meeting. You don't have to tell us in public how you're addressing the police. That's your team. But you need to at least tell us, given these challenges that we're facing, what are the interventions? What am I solving? How are we going to solve this? And our biggest problem is that when it comes to national police commissioners, I think Jamie, you spoke about...
Mighty Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie spoke about it quite succinctly. And he said, well, Masemola was taken, National Commissioner Masemola was taken for granted. But actually, he is doing this thing methodically as possible, because the risk that we would have had a different commissioner and he wouldn't complete his term always existed. And we can't continue in that fashion. It's the same risk that we're facing. I don't agree with President Cyril Ramaphosa on many issues, including Palapala, and how it's been handled and those allegations. But and his silence on many things, and his choice to make announcements alone with his team to the nation on Sunday nights, as opposed to calling a press conference and actually taking questions directly himself. I don't agree with him. But the notion that we must, every time the ANC bleeds, we must all bleed, is completely unnecessary and unwarranted. Removing a sitting president just before his term ends, not a viable proposition, doesn't create a space for international to see, investors in particular. Now I'm going there, to see us as a predictable environment. And investors desperately need a predictable environment for them to bring more money. We want to retain the investments we have, but we want more. So that those investments can help you and I, to help other young people to start businesses, to harness existing businesses, to create space for collaboration. So no, a bit of hypocrisy will help us I think it's in the right direction. So you're on point. I think you spotted it correctly that I've switched because the context required that I switch.
As we close, how do we fix the ills in South Africa, in your opinion? Number one. Do you think white people did a better job of running this country? I'm not saying was apartheid better.
Yeah.
I'm asking, do you think white people, when they were running a country, were doing a better job of running the country, considering the ills we're dealing with?
Okay,
and how do we fix some of the ills, in your opinion?
I want to start with the last question.
Sure.
So no, white people under apartheid didn't do a lot of work tactically that we didn't do better. They just had less challenges because they were only concerned with a very small minority, and the rest of us were just thrown in different spaces to live in the bush or in the townships. That's why I don't celebrate living or going to the township every day. I will hardly see a picture of me in a township because I believe it's an ecosystem that shouldn't exist. And we'll talk about that another day. But have white people in South Africa today and under the democratic dispensation, especially in the Western Cape, demonstrated that they can run an ecosystem, that they can keep a city clean? Yes. Even President Ramaphosa has acknowledged that. So I'm not the only one. And many South Africans who want to be honest will say so. It doesn't mean, when we say they have done a great job in the Western Cape, or Cape Town specifically, it doesn't mean that we ignore the fact that Gugulethu is still a mess and that they've chosen a path to enhance areas that are mostly capital and perhaps even white dominated. So it doesn't mean, so saying one good thing doesn't mean you don't know that next to the airport there's still Islam, that the city of Cape Town or the Western Cape provincial government under the DA is failing to resolve. But they've done a better job at delivering. You can say that there's corruption in the Western Cape, but they steal and work. In other provinces, they just steal and do absolutely nothing. So I don't think it's pretty much a race issue. I mean, Mr. Steenhuisen still has to account for his credit card matters and all the other benefits. I like him, by the way. But all other benefits that you get, the car, there was a car issue, because we only see black corruption. Yes. And we often see political corruption. But I mean, I'm still waiting for a day when we actually ventilate Steinhoff as a commission.
It won't happen.
And what happened there, I'm looking forward to it.
Was it the NPA or the Hawks who said they don't have a budget to investigate? And it was Steinhoff that gave them, I think, 40 million to investigate themselves to see how ridiculous this thing is.
Yeah, it's a budget. It's a budget issue and also a capability issue, because here you are dealing with numbers.
Yeah.
And if you have people who are going to investigate these things, but they don't understand the basics of financial management, you're going to have problems, because what are they investigating? You need people who are competent, who understand the subject so that they can ask the right questions. So I'm looking forward to that day. But how do we fix South Africa? I think let's start small, teach our kids not to throw garbage on the streets. Let's take responsibility at a minimum level.
Who's we?
We meaning South Africans, parents,
the parents
civil
also
society. Yes, I'm saying let's teach each other, all of us.
Who must teach? Who are the people that know that should be teaching the ones that don't know?
The parents.
But the parents don't know. They're also littering.
No.
They're the ones burning the clinics.
No. Some of us don't burn clinics.
Okay.
And there are many of people who don't burn clinics. There are many people who promote good citizenship.
Okay.
Good family life. And then we need to participate in the education of our children, meaning that you have to know what assignment they're submitting or project, what are they writing, what are their frustrations. And then we need to invest in the truth, teach South Africans, especially the South African Police Service and their senior management and the politicians in our country, in parliament and elsewhere, to just simply learn that the truth is so powerful, because you don't have to remember anything else. You only tell the truth. But the minute you sugarcoat, you create problems. Sure. And lastly, to make it work, let us invest in harnessing entrepreneurship, starting of small businesses, and supporting those that exist. So, because that's actually the backbone of the economy. The large corporates can do their part, but they're too involved in raising money for their own investors. The shareholders want their returns on capital. But the small businesses, they can actually help us shift the dial. And I'm really optimistic when I talk about small businesses. I think that is the future of our country.
Thank you, Tshepo. Any closing words from your side?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I talk about Alris, the marketer, and Jack Trout. They have this quote. They say, if you can, be first. And if you can't be first, create a new category in which you can be first. And this was published in a book called Positioning, The Battle for the Human Mind. So I didn't pick it up on ChatGPT or Google.
Thank you so much, Tshepo.
Thank you so much.
Sure.